email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or
The
news.
single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
This week on the podcast, we're going to revisit some of my conversations from the first half of 2023. Here are some of the highlights. Joining me on the conversation today is Dr. Franklin Chang Diaz, a man that has accomplished so much, I could fill the first half of the podcast just listing the accomplishments. But let me at least give a few highlights. Dr. Chang Diaz is an astronaut and scientist. He has a Bachelor's of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Connecticut and a PhD in Applied Plasma Physics from MIT. He's been to space a record-tying 7 times. Born in Costa Rica, he was NASA's first Latin American astronaut to go into space. In addition to being in the NASA Astronaut Hall of Fame, he's a recipient of the U.S. Medal of Liberty, plus many other honors and awards. He's the founder and CEO of Ad Astra Rocket Company, which is dedicated to the development of advanced plasma rocket propulsion. Dr. Chang Diaz, thank you for joining me on the conversation today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Everybody wants to talk about Mars, and I think you gave the analogy somewhere that I saw where it's traditionally using conventional methods might take 7 months to get to Mars, but you guys can do it in less than 6 weeks.
Yes, and I have to be careful because I get in trouble.
Sorry,
with my management here, but the answer is yes. However, you do have to have a power source that can power such a rocket, and that would be a nuclear reactor. And it has to be not just a nuclear reactor, but it has to be a reactor plus the power conversion that allows you to convert the nuclear energy to electrical energy. And then, of course, then you feed that into the rocket. So, you have to have all those components to make that mission so fast. But once you do, yes, you can go fast. And that is exactly the way we want to go to Mars. You don't want to go in 7 or 8 months. It just takes too long.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's all the ancillary things I didn't think about, like the exposure to cosmic radiation is reduced, and the body, as when you spend so much time in space, there's some ramifications on that as well. So by shortening the amount of time you spend and travel, you reduce those parameters as well, which is interesting.
Yeah, and also just all the logistics of having to carry so much food and so much material to be able to sustain your crew. And the other important problem is the fact that the planets do move as you go. And if you take too long to get to Mars, by the time you get there, the Earth is on the other side of the sun, and now you want to come back. You have to wait for the Earth to position itself in the right place so that you can come back. And that ends up turning into a very long mission,
right,
that you might not be prepared for.
Joining me on the podcast today is Doug Bauble. Doug is the chairman of the board and CEO of Jasper Engines and Transmissions and has been so for 11 years. Prior to his executive promotion, Doug dedicated 35 years to Jasper, the leading gas and diesel remanufacturer. Since Doug joined the company, Jasper has expanded to 11 manufacturing facilities with 78 branch locations across the country. In 2018, Forbes listed Jasper as one of America's best mid-sized employers. Doug, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Clint, glad to be with you.
What type of communication do you think yields the most consistent results, especially whether that's on-site or whether that's remote? And do you have to treat them differently? Do you communicate differently to the groups?
Well, I call it the platinum rule. Treat people the way they want to be treated. Our former chairman of the board was extremely detailed. And once in a while, I'd get all excited about a new project, and I'd go in and talk to him, and I'd sell the sizzle and the flavor and all this kind of stuff. And he'd look at me and said, Doug, let's sleep on this. And Clint, if he said, let's sleep on it a couple of days, I knew he was nowhere close to saying yes. And I realized I've got to come to him the way he wants me to come to him, with the facts and the figures. So when I'm on the shop floor, I'm going to have reports that they are used to seeing. I'm not going to bring in my report that I look at every day. I want to show them the reports that they have on their bulletin board. What was your last audit in safety and quality? What gains have you made? Let's talk about those. And there are areas that we've not. What can we do to get gains there? Are we not giving you the proper training? Are we not giving you the proper equipment? What about the proper tooling? And what I found is if you go to your people and you ask them, it's amazing what they'll tell you. But so often in businesses today, people keep bringing up things. Nobody does anything, so they stop doing. We have a program at Jasper called Continuous Improvement, where you submit continuous improvement ideas. Over the last 5 years, we've averaged 16,000 continuous improvement ideas each and every year out of roughly 23 to 2,600 people. But what excites me more is we've implemented 85% of those each and every year.
Wow. That's
And
amazing.
it can be little things, titling something. It can be changing something on the floor to make sure. We had a fire alarm go off not too long ago. And it was simply a result that it wasn't marked off where these boxes should be. A box fell over, hit the fire alarm thing. Now we got people not knowing what the problem is. And it was so simple. But then share those best practices with other people.
Joining me on the podcast today is Kathy Orchiola. Kathy is the West Region Vice President of PCL Construction, where she was responsible for strategy, operations, and performance in PCL's offices across Hawaii, Washington, and California. She's also on the board of directors for PCL Construction Holdings, where she represents the interests of stakeholders. Kathy is most passionate about building people, structures, and legacies. She's also an active member of the Young Presidents Organization and a dedicated supporter of the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Kathy, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Clint.
It's my pleasure. So one of the things I also read was you're involved with the ACE Mentor Program, and I was wondering, I really admire your passion in investing in the future of construction. And how has your involvement in that program really influenced your leadership style, and how do you view membership today?
I mentioned earlier on that I came from a pretty tough upbringing, and I was so fortunate to have a science teacher who came alongside me in high school. And I actually had him for all 3 years. My high school was only a 3-year high school. So I had him for chemistry, physics, and AP bio. And he just really invested in me and showed me that, well, one, he helped me get into college. He helped me learn that, I could pay for college. I was the first person in my family to ever go to college. And so he helped me to get scholarships. And then he showed me that I had a great future in the STEM field, and that it was ripe with opportunities for individuals like myself. And so, having that fortune, I wouldn't be where I am today if not for Tracy Bailey, my chem, physics, and AP bio teacher in high school. He really helped to shape my future. And I want to do the same for other young students who may not have someone in their life that is able to do that. Or maybe they don't have someone that they can look at and be inspired to that looks like them, and say, hey, if that person can do it, they look just like me, I can do it too. Right. And so the idea of investing in these young students and giving them hope and unlocking the avenue towards success and showing them it's possible, because hope is so important when you come from that type of environment. It doesn't necessarily exist. And you think, well, I can't pay for college, so I can't go. And so being able to get young people excited about not only about construction and STEM opportunities, but just the idea that I can go and do and participate in a greater, bigger life with a greater, bigger vision.
Joining me on the podcast today is John Zarancic. As president of the Americas at Fluence, John is responsible for go-to-market implementation and honing customer-centric solutions for customers in the region. Prior to this role, John acted as chief operating officer, where he directed the Fluence teams that create and deliver storage solutions and services to leading customers around the world. Working with progressive power system players, John and his team create valuable business use cases for grid-scale storage, educate storage users in those benefits, manage the deployment of new systems, and help service those systems throughout their complete life cycle. John, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Clint. It's great.
So what about Fluence? What do you guys do?
Well, Fluence is a great company. We're just about to have our 5th year anniversary. We are completely focused on making large format battery energy storage systems for use on the power grid. So we build and design and implement these very large batteries. And when I say large, I mean, collectively on the sort of imagine a Home Depot sized battery, if you will, that connects to the power system. And rather than building a new power plant, a new gas plant, a new coal plant, anything like that, we're building these large battery plants, and they work to stabilize the grid. They work to capture energy from renewables and others that produce only at certain times of the day and bring those to the other times that we need. So it's been a great complement to some of the aging infrastructure that we've had in power and the new influx of renewables. But that's essentially what we do. We look for ways to apply this battery technology to make the power system work better. We've been doing that in more than 30 countries around the world. We started in this very, very early and are the largest and the leader in this space. If you think about your utility wherever you exist, whatever the power company is, they're running power plants and they're having to put it over the wires. We're doing things with batteries at a scale that help solve those same jobs. So rather than building a new power plant, we build a battery. Rather than building a new transmission line, in some cases, we're able to put a battery in that alleviates a constraint, and you don't have to do all of that construction. Some of these things, power plants can take 2 or 3 years to build. It can take 5 years to permit. If you're doing renewables, a lot of times they're out in the desert or in the middle of nowhere, and then you have to get the power back. We can put these in the middle of a city block. They're innocuous. They don't make any noise. They don't have any emissions. They don't need to, have anything around them. You can do them very, very quickly. And so they've given a lot of flexibility to power planners, and at the same time reducing cost for the whole system.
Joining me on the conversation today is Kristen Sanderson, the VP of Customer Advocacy and the Chief Diversity Officer for GE Digital. As the Chief Diversity Officer, Kristen owns the operational goals and priorities related to inclusion and diversity and provides leadership to achieve those goals in partnership with HR, the rest of the senior leadership team at GE Digital, and with the other CDOs across GE. As VP of Customer Advocacy, Kristen is responsible for establishing customer connection into the business, leading the initiative to improve business processes to eliminate defects and drive customer sentiment across grid software. Kristen, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
When I was doing the research for this interview, I saw you a couple places. You were, I think, one called Engineering Girls, where I guess you do some things there. And then you also are with the GE Girls STEM Camp. Can you talk about those?
Absolutely. Yes. Getting involved with our GE Girls Camp is amazing. It's a camp that we do in conjunction with a GE site, a university, and a middle school. It's a program, a summer program for 7th grade girls. And our intent is to run like a 1-week summer camp and to really engage them with, engineering activities, a broad range in many cases. We do science, we do chemistry sometimes, we do coding, of course, because we're software. And a lot of other activities that we can find, and so our women all volunteer to work with the partners to put together the program and to run the program. I've done everything from being there during the program to leading activities. I've also worked at our global GE Girls team to figure out how we could scale the camp and do more of them. We started out with one, and now we do so many more. During the pandemic, we had to figure out how to make them be virtual, and so we did that transition as well. So, a lot of things with that, but just so exciting to work with these young women. And the goal really for us is to keep them interested in STEM. Just give them that extra little push that keeps them going in that direction. And, they may come to GE and they may not, but having, more women in the STEM careers is a benefit for all of us. And that's really the goal.
Joining me on the conversation today is Dr. Brad Walkenhorst, the Chief Technology Officer at Bastille Networks. He's an expert in RF sensor networks and has a passion for securing enterprise networks. Dr. Walkenhorst received his BS and MS degrees in electrical engineering from Brigham Young University and received his PhD from my alma mater, Georgia Tech. He specializes in signal processing and electromagnetic research applied to wireless communications and spectrum operations. He has an extremely impressive track record in this field and is a gifted speaker and technical contributor with over 70 publications and 4 patents. It's always a pleasure to connect with a fellow Yellow Jacket, so thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you, Clint. Appreciate you having me on.
Can you give some examples of some of the wireless threats and vulnerabilities that your platform has successfully detected and addressed?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen any number of vulnerabilities. You've probably seen a number in the press, and I could talk about some of those, but I'll just talk about the ones that we have specifically seen from our system. There are cables that you can buy. I don't have one with me, but a standard charging cable like this, they look just like that, except that inside of the sleeve of the cable, there is a microcontroller and some antennas that allow it to communicate wirelessly via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. So this becomes the receiving end of a command and control link. When you plug it into your device, which becomes now a target of an attack, some attacker connects wirelessly, and through the elevated privileges of a USB port, they can do pretty much anything. So they can send keystrokes for keystroke injection. They can install malware. They can exfiltrate your data. They can basically own your device, and from that, work into other areas of the network. So it's a very powerful device. We found one of these with our system on an executive floor of a Fortune 10 company. We've seen them in other places. They're not ubiquitous by any means, but they're readily available, and they are in the wild. So that's a little bit crazy. There's one last example that I want to give that I know I said I was going to focus only on the ones that we see, but this one's relevant, I think, because it was such an interesting attack method, and it's something that Bastille would have seen if we had been installed there. So I think it's a cool story to tell. This was a drone that had a Wi-Fi device as a payload, and it flew over and landed on the roof of a building that was home to a financial services company. And this Wi-Fi device that was the payload, not clear on all the details, because they don't release everything, but apparently what's most likely to have happened is that the device acted as an evil twin. They impersonated an access point on the corporate network, captured devices, probably tricked someone into giving up credentials, and then used that to make their way into the network and start poking around. So that's kind of cool and also scary, but
in an evil way, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go out and do that, but I hat tip to the guys who thought of it. It's cool. But just knowing that kind of attack is possible, I think that's step one, right? And then how do we identify those things in real time? And worst case, if it happens, we've got data to do forensic analysis on it. But anyway, we have the ability to detect that kind of an attack, and I think that's a cool story because it's not a difficult attack to conduct. The new part of this was that it was delivered by drone, which is kind of cool.
Today, I'm pleased to have with me Dr. Olga Kubasova, founder and CEO at Image Analysis Group, a leading AI-powered drug development and precision medicine company whose goal is to accelerate novel drug development by using the right analytical tools and modern trial infrastructure. She's an active researcher, co-author of 60-plus publications, scientific advisor, and mathematician with over 10 years of expertise in actively managing innovation in life science companies, asset positioning, strategy, and capital raising. She's a 4-time winner of National and International Entrepreneur of the Year awards. It's pretty impressive. Her ambition is to bring truly disruptive technologies, AI, and the best of machine learning to clinical practice and research. Olga, thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's my pleasure. When I think of AI, medical isn't where I think about it, right? I mean, I think about Fahrenheit 451 and artificial intelligence being something. Now, of course, what's in the news is ChatGPT and all these other ones. So it's really fascinating to see what you've done with AI within the medical community.
Absolutely. But I think medical is really embracing it now because obviously there are older people, population is getting older. You have more chronic diseases. You cannot afford not to do it. And to me, is just looking around us, right? So if you take a condition such as rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, osteoarthritis, huge market. In osteoarthritis, no treatments. Why is that? Because we can't yet prove that the treatment is working efficiently. And why can't we do it? Because there is a certain sophistication around trial design. And that almost takes a separate topic in its own right. So AI there could really help. Oncology, on the other hand, which is another medical field where we all could do with better treatments, you only have a handful of patients, so you can have a handful of data. How do you use this data wisely? How do you deploy more sophisticated measures to understand treatment impact or patient response at the earliest possible stage? Because here, you can save somebody's life and you can impact a new treatment paradigm. So that's how the blockbusters are being born, right? You start with 10 patients and you hope for the best. And if you actually use data instead of hoping for the best, or both, you could move much faster.
Joining me on the podcast today is Jim Sandusky. Jim is a longtime consumer electronics industry veteran with over 30 years of experience in business-to-consumer marketing, sales, product strategy, and finance. In 2017, Jim was appointed president of the newly formed Sharp Home Electronics Company of America, which brought together the divisions of Sharp Manufacturing Company of America, Sharp Electronics Marketing Company of America, and Services and Solutions Group. In this capacity, Jim oversees Sharp's home appliance manufacturing facility in Memphis, Tennessee, Sharp's U.S. sales and marketing operations in Montvale, New Jersey, and Sharp's national customer and dealer service operations. Prior to joining Sharp in 2011, Jim held leadership positions in sales and marketing at Panasonic, HP, Samsung, and Sony Electronics, as well as financial positions at General Electric. He holds a BSBA from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Jim, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Thanks, my pleasure, Clint.
Induction is interesting to me because I know that I didn't know much about it other than obviously now there's a buzz around the problem with gas, and my wife's a dedicated gas user. So we're redoing our kitchen. I'm trying to convince her to go the induction route. And just from an engineering perspective, it's, I think, 90% efficient. It's the most efficient way of cooking out there. So do you see induction really growing in the marketplace?
I do. The U.S. is actually behind other geographies in the world with the adoption of induction. I mean, induction it's new technology. And, there's a Bloomberg magazine, I think it's a cover story, in fact, that is talking about this topic. Because you're right, this has been in the press. There's been some press recently about, how gas ranges can actually introduce, contaminants, I'll say, into the home. And so Bloomberg magazine has done a cover story on it. And in this article, they talk about how in Europe, only 3% of households now, or I should say 3% of unit sales are of gas products, and everything else has switched over to electric and primarily induction. I mean, obviously there's radiant cooktop or electric cooktops, but mostly it's moved to induction. And even in Canada, induction has become quite popular these days. So I think it's a matter of when, not if, induction becomes popular here in the United States. And to what you were saying a minute ago, induction combines the best of gas and electric cooking. So from a comparison versus electric, it's very easy to clean, because unlike a radiant cooktop that you can get, because the glass is heating up with a radiant cooktop, if anything spills over from your pot, it's very difficult to clean. But with induction, you're only heating the pan, and your hand can actually touch the cooktop, and you won't get burned. So there's safety to it. It's easy to cook and or easy to clean, that is. And then with regards to gas, gas has that kind of that visual appeal to people. They call it the UX factor. But if you want to boil water, you can boil water nearly twice as fast with an induction cooktop, because you're using magnetic energy that only heats the pan itself, and you can boil water twice as fast as you can with gas. And then what's also nice is the precise temperature control that you can get with induction that you can't get with gas, and you can't even get as precise control with electric as well. So really just all around, induction is clearly the way to go for the future.
Joining me today is Ed Moss. He's been the president of Vox Automotive for nearly a decade. He has over 20 years of experience in operations and manufacturing for domestic and international commercial electronics companies. Ed spearheads new product launches on a multi-facility international basis. He has extensive experience in production, materials and systems, and inventory management. While with Vox, Ed has helped support a 50% growth for the leading automotive audio manufacturer. Ed, I'm so glad you joined me on the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Clint. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
So what tips do you have for those wanting to pursue a leadership position? I mean, your career path is a little bit like mine. I was in the Navy for 6 years out of high school because I didn't know what I wanted to do either. And then eventually figured out I wanted to be an electrical engineer and went to Georgia Tech, but clearly don't do that today in my day job. But so my path was circuitous as well. I'm just curious, what suggestions would you have for people who want to be leaders?
Well, I think first you have to be willing to enjoy working with people. Of all, backgrounds. And you have to, be willing to deal with the conflict that arises when you're responsible for what a lot of people do. It's not easy being in middle management. We all have a boss, even as president and CEO, unless it's a private company. I have a boss. I have a board of directors, and we have investors that want to see improvement. As well, I have employees under me and they have employees under them. And, you have to be able to handle the pressure of both. And I think that it's something that you have to learn how to handle. I think my dad gave me some good advice that kind of leave the stress and the job at work. When you come home, shut it off and don't bring it into the family. That's easier said than done. After a long day, my wife says, "How did your day go?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry. I just really don't want to talk about it now because I'll be here till midnight telling you everything that went on. And I want to decompress." And she's understanding. "I'll catch you up on the weekend," kind of a thing. So it's not easy to do, though. It's not. So, I remember as a young supervisor, I'd stay up in bed thinking of different things I needed to take care of. And I would have a notebook next to my bed and a pen, and I would just write it down. I mean, now you've got your phone, you can put notes in there. But then I knew it was there for me in the morning and I could sleep well and I'd get up. Oh, yeah, okay, I need to get on top of these different issues. I think that to be successful, you can't rationalize poor performance. You can't make excuses. You can't get defensive. You need to turn problems into an opportunity to solve, to show that you're capable. Turn it into a challenge. Look at problems as the glass is half full, not half empty. I think nobody wants to work for a negative leader. It's you've got to be positive. If you want people to work for you, I think you have to be able to create a sense of urgency and purpose around common goals. I think that's what good leaders do.
Thanks for listening. We have many more great conversations lined up for the rest of the year. Be sure to tune in on Wednesdays for new conversations and insights. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.